Lavender, and I am your host. I am your host this evening, and it is a pleasure to be with you. Hold on 1 second here. It's a pleasure to be with you. Can you hear me okay? Very good. A pleasure to be with you and to hear some outstanding research. And I use the word outstanding somewhat hesitantly because it's data that shows an acute challenge that we have as a community as it relates to race and racism. The foundation is pleased to be in this space of hosting and working alongside of you, being that we are the city's largest race equity philanthropy. Our dollars are here to make sure or to ensure or to support you. So as the results of these recommendations come to life, we're walking alongside of you to resource those things and offer our support. I want to say on behalf of Randy Russell, our president and CEO, and Donna Peterson, our board chair, again, I'm glad to be a part of the team this evening. As the evening does progress, there are a few things I want you to keep in mind. First, we'll hear from the panelists or those folks who have dedicated themselves to this particular amount of research. We'll allow them 2 or 3 minutes to share why this study was important to them. We will then hear from the deputy mayor and the mayor of our city as they share why city government and why this particular administration has been committed to this research. We will then hear from Dr. Ruth Mae Sears, who's been the leader in this piece of work and will share her detailed description for us to look at as we review and have questions later on. We will also allow you as an audience to participate. The chat box will open and you'll be unmuted on occasion to share your journey in race. Please pay attention, folks. Here's your chance to share what you believe to be the best and highest use of this research. We'll come back to Ruth Mae, come back to you for more questions and answers, and adjourn for the evening. If we're ready to go, I'm going to call upon each of the members of this outstanding team to share 2 minutes of their journey. I will call your name, and please feel free. 2, maybe 3 minutes at tops. If you go over 3 minutes, Mr. Carl gonna stop you, okay? We want everyone to share. Let's begin with Dr. Ruth Mae Sears. Answer the question, why was this study important to you? 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ruth Mae Sears, and I'm an associate professor for mathematics education, the associate director of Coalition for Science Literacy with a focus of inclusive excellence, and the lead faculty facilitator for USF Inclusive and Equitable Pedagogy Program. I currently serve as the principal investigator for this study. My motivation for the study is to support and catalyze systemic initiatives to promote racial equity and inclusive excellence in which individuals are afforded an opportunity to excel regardless of their race, creed, ethnicity, or gender. Hence, as I engage in the work in examining structural racism, I choose to see the glass as half full. It is my belief that with collaboration, careful planning, hard work, and resiliency, our collective efforts can contribute to the betterment of the overall quality of life for individuals within St. Petersburg. I wish to thank my team for their contribution, which is comprised of community and university researchers and community and student collaborators and advocates. I also express gratitude to residents of St. Petersburg who share their narratives about their lived realities and experiences and attended our earlier town hall meetings that discuss structural racism. Gaining insight from diverse individuals who were representative from various intersectionality and identities motivated me to hope for a better tomorrow in which racial equity is evident and normalized in St. Petersburg for present and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sears, our principal investigator on this project. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Johannes Reichgeld. I hope I pronounced that right. The co-principal investigator on the project. Dr. Johannes?
It was close enough. My name is Hans Reichgeld. I'm a professor of information systems at USF St. Petersburg campus, where I also run the Institute for Data Visualization and Social Justice. So that will tell you why I was interested in this study. My main contribution to this study has been working with other folks on getting quantitative data that show that racism is persistent even in the current day. that doesn't mean, well, what we're saying is not new to the community. The community knows that, for example, law enforcement officers treat Black folks differently from white folks. So what I'm hoping is that the results of the more quantitative research that I've been involved in can be used to convince those folks who still think that structural racism doesn't exist, that it is a real problem, and that they can work with everybody to address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. James McHale, dear friend of the community, always good to hear from you, sir. 2 minutes. Are you on the call, sir? Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. There you go.
Great.
Live. You're live, sir. You're live.
I'll try not to take 2 minutes, my friend, but I am here at USF St. Petersburg, as is Hanrich Geld. It's important for us as people here in the city to be involved with this work. It's a study that looked intensively at the history of racism in St. Petersburg and documents that. So it has a direct impact on all of our friends and colleagues and neighbors and fellow residents here. I direct the Family Study Center at USF St. Pete. Some of you know the work that we do here on behalf of infants and young children and their families in St. Pete. And what drew me to this project, I think, was number one, it was a heavy lift and wanting to be able to contribute something of value, give back, and create a report that would be a living document for the residents of the city to be able to stand upon in efforts to try to eliminate racism and promote racial justice work in our city. And I think it's also incredibly important for white men and women to be involved in this work as well. This is something that we all have to do together in order to sort of, dismantle white supremacy and really promote racial justice in our city. I was grateful to have this opportunity, and I will take on every one of them that comes my way. So thank you for inviting me to be part of the project. Thanks for a couple minutes, Carl. I appreciate it.
Dr. McHale, thank you as always for your presentation. And now let's hear from Miss Gypsy Gallardo. Miss Gallardo, are you on the call?
I am here. Thank you
very much. Good evening. 2 minutes, please.
Good evening. So I'm Gypsy. I am CEO of the 2020 plan, which was a poverty reduction plan, and of the One Community plan, which is a plan originally sponsored by the Kreisman administration to create an equitable approach to economic development in South St. Pete. I'm here because Nikki invited me. Nikki Gaskin-Capehart, the city's urban affairs director. I stayed because I became totally committed and engrossed in the bowels of St. Petersburg's history. And it became an opportunity to document concretely the many, many laws and public policy decisions in St. Petersburg that have materially shaped the present day economic race gap in St. Pete. And so this became a chance to step back from the daily grind of leading economic equity projects and truly understand the arc of history that brought us to this place. And so just to mention, among the many things that we discovered during this is that the city, just as one example, supported a convict labor program that targeted African Americans that ensnared thousands of African Americans into forced labor programs, both at the city level, county level, and state level. And so there's a reckoning that has happened through this study. I will mention that in speaking with representatives of Bloomberg Harvard and the Kennedy School at Harvard, St. Petersburg is the first city that they know of to undertake a study of structural racism. So what we're doing is incredibly innovative, and I hope that it can serve for the same reason that Dr. Hahn said, that here before you, here documented through history, through various sources, is what happened here. And that it gets to a place of maturation in the public discourse, and that we begin to make policy decisions guided by that history. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. By the way, if you are just joining the call, Welcome to Community Conversations, where we are revealing the study of racism in our city, and you're hearing from the principal investigator team that pulled together this incredibly important data. Next, let's hear from Mr. Tim Dutton. Mr. Dutton, two minutes, please.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate the invitation to be involved in this. I'm with Unite Pinellas, which focuses exclusively on race equity, and we are the policy arm for the Foundation for Healthy St. Pete. What drew me to this is that, frankly, there's a heightened awareness now of issues that are race equity, and I have a sense that we have an opportunity to make significant progress now in a way that, frankly, hasn't been open in the past. The fact is, and Gypsy touched on it a little bit, that this city has three things going on right now that revolve around issues of race equity. One of those is the Charter Review Commission, which has very specific race equity amendments involved. The second one is that this summer, there was a resolution passed by the city council that said that racism is a public health problem. And this is the third of these. I think, to double down on what Gypsy Gallardo said about, there aren't many places, probably any place, that's taken on these three kinds of things to really address race equity in real terms. So I believe now is a special time to make the changes that can focus on policy and on practice. And I think that there's an urgency, and this sort of pushes at that. And again, thank you for the invitation to be a part of this.
Thank you, Tim. If you're in the audience and you later on have a comment to make as you listen to each presentation, please feel free to write your questions down, save them for the time, and address the person that you want to answer your question. Next, Dr. Fenda. Dr. Fenda, please, 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fenda Akiwumi. I'm a professor of geosciences at USF Tampa campus. I'm also the director of the Institute on Black Life at USF. I'm in my 4th year as leader of that institute. And our mission is to serve as a resource center on the history and culture of the Black experience in Africa and the African diaspora, with a focus on Blackness and anti-Black racism, education, and research. We have 3 main goals, and goal number 2 directly relates to this particular study, and that is to facilitate local and global community engagement using interdisciplinary research and service projects. And our goal is to find sustainable solutions to systemically induced economic, environmental, and sociocultural problems affecting Black communities. So I'm here representing the Institute on Black Life and myself as a researcher on cultural diversity and equity issues.
We are hearing great things about the Institute and want to hear even more later on. Dr. Dana Thompson Dorsey, please share.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dana Thompson Dorsey, and I am the David C. Anshin Endowed Chair in Education Innovation and Director of the David C. Anshin Center for the Advancement of Teaching, as well as an Associate Professor of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at the University of South Florida on the Tampa campus. I critically examine federal, state, and local education laws and policies, as well as school and university practices and how they influence equity, access, and opportunity for pre-K to 20 historically minoritized students and communities. I'm new to USF and the Tampa Bay area, and Ruth May actually asked me to be involved in this study because of my work dealing with race and racism. A lot of my research and my teaching is focused on structural racism, primarily in education, but also because of my legal background and the work that I've done with practicing law, I've focused on that as well, and focusing on issues of implicit bias in dealing with the criminal justice system that I would contribute greatly, I guess, to the project. But this also gave me an opportunity to get to know the area, particularly in St. Petersburg. And I'm also working on another project as part of my the work with my center in St. Pete. So I got a chance to really get to know the area, since a lot of the work that I do focuses on segregation and focuses on communities and school segregation as well as housing segregation. This has really been an eye-opener for me, and I've learned a lot about the communities in St. Pete, and this is a passion project for me. So thank you for allowing me to be involved.
Dr. Thompson, welcome to our city. Welcome to the Bay Area. Much to do and glad you can contribute. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Gwendolyn Reese. Ms. Reese, please share.
Namaste and good evening. Thank you, Carl. I'm Gwendolyn Reese, President and CEO of Peyton Reese Peyton Consulting and President of the African American Heritage Association of St. Pete, Florida. I was born and raised in what is often referred to as the Sunshine City, but as this study will show, the sun doesn't shine equally on all those who live here. I was called to this study not by a person, but by a higher power, and in all honesty, I was somewhat reluctant. My primary role in the study was to provide the history of the African American presence in the city and also examples and documentation of the racist laws, policies, practices, behaviors, and attitudes which impacted and continue to impact the quality of life for African Americans in St. Petersburg today. There are few cities, if any, in this country that have embarked on such a study. And so I'd like to express my gratitude to Mayor Kreisman for seeing the need for the study. The work was intense, and the results provide a roadmap to addressing structural racism and the resulting inequities. Now we will see if there is the will to do so. On a personal note, while working on the study, I experienced a level of Black fatigue and racism overload unlike anything I've ever experienced before. Not from my colleagues, but from the assault of the evidence of racism that was uncovered. Gypsy mentioned some of it during the process. And for me, the trauma of reliving some of these events which took place during my lifetime. However, I'm thankful for this experience because it made me acutely aware of how we as a people are traumatized, whether we are aware or not, on a daily basis by microaggressions, overt and covert racist actions, behaviors, remarks, and even body language. And most of all, it pointed out for me the importance of self-love and self-care. I'm honored to have been a part of this study, and I look forward to talking with you, to dialoguing with you during this evening's conversation. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Y. Michelle Coussard, project manager for the project. Please speak, 2 minutes.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Michelle Bradham Kuzar, and I'm so glad to be here with everyone. I am currently the project manager for this study. I requested to be a part of this study. I did not know it was coming out, and I have to agree with Ms. Gwendolyn Reese that it was by divine power for me to be here, because this was something I was reluctant to move forward with, because I noticed that inequality has a crew. It's not just about one person. And so my motivation for this study was that by activating my voice is tied to someone else's freedom. And so when I realized that by being a part of this study could be the release of someone else or someone else having that advancement, it was very moving that I become a part of this and make sure that this work was instrumental within the community. Currently, I am the chair for the bylaws committee for the American Counseling Association, which we oversee 55,000 counselors in all 50 states. And my area of specialty is with individuals with disabilities and also with the mental health population. So I want to learn more, and I continue to learn more in regards to this study, because it was a great work in regards to how to communicate this to our counselors. Thank you for having me.
Excellent, Dr. Kusar. Mr. Jabbar Edmond, are you on the call today from the community? Representing the community, Mr. Jabbar Edmond, are you on the call, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I am. So the driving force for me for being a part of this study, because just like Ms. Gwen and so many others said, I was reluctant as well. But what I felt was most important was, to demonstrate for people in the community to have faith in the system, because so many, as you can see, as you're going to see in this study, a lot of oppression, it oftentimes makes us not have faith in the process, right? And I definitely want to thank everyone involved, because I think this is important, an important step in a marathon, because we have a long way to go. When the results are out, we will see that it is tough going through this data. It's tough knowing this is what we're living through, right? Seeing the empirical evidence, seeing the numbers, seeing it right in your face. It is stressful. So I like to thank everybody that went through this process, because I feel this is only a step. We have to keep going. It is a marathon. We have to take the steps necessary, to end inequities in our city. I thank everybody. I'm a community organizer with Florida Rising. I work with a lot of different groups, community development and training center. And one of the most important things is helping people get faith back in the process. So I think that was my biggest hurdle I had to jump over as well. And I'm thankful that we're here. And we have a lot more work to do, and we have a long way to go. Thank you.
Jabbar, thank you as always, my friend. And now we have two students that were also part of the collaboration, and that was a smart thing to do, to give them their chance and their voice. First, Miss Jalessa Blackshear, are you on the call?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lavender. Hi, my name is Jalessa Blackshear. I'm an activist here, a recent graduate of University of South Florida in political science. I remember seeing the Tampa Bay Times releasing an article about the study was happening. So I found out a little late. I joined the team late spring. Really, on behalf of my ancestry settled in Methodist town here in the city of St. Petersburg in the 40s. So everything I do politically related to my political activism is in the steps of my legacy. So I'm here to add to the project, but just a different perspective. And it's been an honor to be amongst the project management, the principal investigation, and among the legacy that is in a group and scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you very, 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 very much. And now the final report and sharing from this group, Mr. Casey, or Miss Casey Lepak. I'm sorry, Casey? Are you on the call? Are you on the call, Casey? If not, I want to move to the mayor and deputy mayor. As anybody could imagine, this kind of institutional work, this level of research needs the support of city government and city administration. And we have obviously a progressive team that has brought this issue to bear. So let's allow our mayor a few minutes to share why is city government and why is it so important to have city government particularly tied to this kind of research, followed by our deputy mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Rick Kreisman.
Thank you, Carl. And let me just let everyone know, Deputy Mayor is, I don't think we'll be able to jump on. She is in the middle of a city council meeting and probably will be there till quite late tonight. But before I begin my remarks, I did want to say a few thank yous. First to Nikki and all the staff for the city of St. Petersburg that have been doing work on this issue. But most importantly, also to all of our partners. Look, I mean, if we're going to really truly address racism and create equality, it's not going to happen with just government. It only is going to work if we're all working together on this. And we're having honest and candid conversations and dialogue. Because this is important work. It is necessary work. It is long overdue work. And I appreciate everyone's dedication. Now, if you've heard me say this once, you've probably heard me say it 1,000 times. But I think this is a great way of setting the table this evening. And that's by repeating the city's vision statement. And that is that St. Petersburg will be a city of opportunity where the sun shines on all who come to live, work, and play, that we will be an innovative, creative, and competitive community that honors its past as we pursue our future. Now, this vision is aspirational, but it's who we want to be. We have a steadfast commitment to honor our shared past as we pursue our promising future. And for a large segment of our community, that means acknowledging the unfortunate truth that disadvantage was, and in some cases remains, a systemized outcome for African Americans here in St. Pete. Now, opportunity cannot be realized in our city without us looking back and documenting our full story as it has unfolded for all of our residents in this city. We know that there have been unacceptable policies and practices and decisions and abuses of power that have led to unequal treatment and inequitable outcomes for our Black residents. And that's really why we're here. We are being intentional about this. Such transgressions must not happen again. Our city must promise to equally provide and protect not only people of color in our community, but everyone. And this is a special time, as has been said. We are all about diversity and the value that it brings to our community. And we have made strides, changed policies and practices. We've made sure that long-held rhetoric was made real, but look, there's a lot of work to do still. We've commissioned this study, this academic study, to objectively document the history of systemic racism in our community. And as was said, it lays bare its impacts across systems and sectors and recommends pathways to reconciliation and to healing. So as a community, let us take these steps together and continue on our city's journey toward our vision of truly becoming a city of opportunity where the sun really does shine on all who are here in St. Pete.
Mayor Kreisman, thank you very, very much for those powerful words. And as you embark on this last leg of the journey, my friend, we know what it's like. Your legacy is sure. We are grateful and thankful for your leadership, sir. It's been outstanding. Not only that, but you've also joined the Pinellas Race Equity Leadership Council that we as a foundation have organized countywide, and we are just thankful for that. Thank you, Mayor Kreisman, and to your family. We realize, ladies and gentlemen, that this kind of research, as was captured by Gwen, is exhausting. It is powerful. You may weep, you may wail, you may remember what you've gone through, but it must begin with definition because it is research. So to share that definition and talk further about the value of it, I'm going to bring forth Dr. Ruth May Sears, who's been the team leader on this project, to give our definition, after which we will ask you for your own opinions and points of view around race and racism. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ruth May Sears.
One of the outcomes of the study is to show how structural racism impacts Black lives and the St. Pete community historically and today. Structural racism reinforces inequities and promotes discriminatory practices that impacts people in many ways, affecting their overall quality of life. According to a well-respected source, the Aspen Institute, structural racism is a system in which public policies, institutional practices, cultural representation, and other norms work in various, often reinforcing ways to perpetuate racial group inequity. It identifies dimensions of our history and culture that have allowed privileges associated with whiteness and disadvantage associated with color to endure and adapt over time. Structural racism is not something that a few people or institutions choose to practice. Instead, it has been a feature of the social, economic, and political system in which we all exist. End of quote. Racism impacts every aspect of our lives, Racism can impact an individual on various levels, be it personal, interpersonal, institutional, and structural. For instance, it can impact the quality of education you receive, the individuals you can network with, the institutional opportunities that you can qualify for to benefit from, and your overall advancement professionally. Due to barriers faced relative to education, healthcare, housing, and whether you interacted with the criminal legal system can and often does impact your opportunities. If we all want to disrupt and dismantle structural racism, we need to carefully address challenges in systems like economic development, education, criminal legal systems, health, law enforcement, and legislative entities, utilizing an approach that needs to be sustained over time. Thank you.
Because we are muted here, Mr. Carl. 1 second, there we are. This is now the time for community conversation. So I believe we're going to unmute people and allow you to share. And when you do, we have 30 minutes for this portion of our program. This first 15 minutes, let's answer this question. What were your observations and experiences with racism? Now, for some, pondering an answer to that may conjure up really deep, heartfelt emotions. We want to hear that. For others, it may be casual, it may be intellectual, but we do want to hear that also. So, the floor is open. Please comment, answering the question. What were your observations and experiences with racism? Please share. Anyone?
This is Kellen Nixon with Nixon & Company Consulting Group. Very, very powerful question to kick off. And I would say that my experience is actually dealt, I think, more in higher education. As I finished my graduate work and begin into the workforce, I then felt it in a different way, not just in the sense of how I was being oppressed in the corporate space, but also just the expectations set on me as an African-American man working in education. And the stark differences of opportunities given, as well as perspectives had around my work. So definitely growing up in Central Florida, there were elements, but I would really say at the level of being mature enough to understand that this is a system that is very structural, that advantages some and disadvantages others. It became quite clear in my professional pathway that was a reckoning of racism for me. So that's where I would say it really hit me.
Kellen, thank you for that corporate observation, because oftentimes we forget at the community level that many of our brothers and sisters work in corporate spaces where they may be the first person of color in the department and the division, and it's a challenge working in that culture for sure. And I appreciate your sharing. Anyone else want to share? You get 2 minutes to share. Answering the question, what were your observations and experiences with racism? The floor is open.
This is Nasheed Meduan. I'm new to St. Petersburg. I'm originally from the Mississippi Delta, and my experiences growing up, whether in school or otherwise, casually, has been generational fear of the emergence of African Americans as participants in the community, business owners, and contributors to society, and their ability to affect partisanship, voting, and galvanizing thought. And so with that, I've witnessed people just simply either ignore, exclude, or be aggressive, using violence actually to deter any type of emergence of Black political activity or otherwise, brown as well.
Powerful. Nasheed, thank you very much. Thank you for your honesty and your bravery. Please, someone else want to share your experience in answering the question, What is your experience and observations with racism here in our city, in your life? Please share. Eric.
Yes, Eric Jackson. I'd like to share an experience that took place with me in 1992 in Tallahassee, Florida. At that particular time, a college student in the School of Pharmacy. I was involved with in a high-speed chase on my way going to school, and the person who was driving was not actually a student, but he was taking me to school at this time, and he failed to stop. So we ended up in a car accident at the school. By me failing to give up any information, I received probably the worst beating I ever received. I didn't go to the police department first. I went to their own little holding cell. At this particular time, I was handcuffed. The officer, because I would not give up any information. I probably wasn't the most cooperative at this time either. He reached probably deep as he could in his throat, and he gave the biggest glob of spit, and he spit on my face.
My God.
And this pain, like they say, is traumatizing. Today I'm going through a lot, but we're gonna overcome this right here.
Come on, Eric.
So what it did, right? They had to put a label with me. To this day, I fought, but I beat that charge with 2 years probation, without any type of legal assistance, because I just kept saying no, no, no. But I didn't know when I signed over on this piece of paper of stating that I'm gonna plea out, that I was gonna be this felon for the rest of my life. My charges are 2 accounts, a concealed weapon, aggravated assault on a law officer, and resisting arrest with violence. He said when I pointed my gun at him, they threw his gun down. There's no fingerprints of mine on no gun. I made decisions and choices because that's what the system made me do.
Hang in there, Eric. My brother, listen, we are blessed that you have survived and you're moving on. It's tough, but you reference a serious challenge with law enforcement, especially with Black men. And it's, I'm sure, part of this study and part of this reveal. Thank you, Eric, for sharing. Deborah Thrower, you did put in the chat box about your experience has been in nonprofit and human services organizations in higher education. Deborah, are you on the call to share any more about that?
Yes, thank you, Carl. My name is Deborah Thrower, and my experiences has been in nonprofit organizations as a social worker. And in these positions, it could be social work position, supervisor, working with leadership that did not reflect diversity. And the higher I advanced in education, the more blatant the racism became. As far as higher edu, go ahead. You were going to say something, Carl.
Yeah, Deborah, be specific. Tell us, can you share with us an episode, if you could, about what you did experience in that space? Because we got lots of higher ed folk on this call and nonprofit organizations that need to hear from your experience and your wisdom. So can you share? You don't have to, but could you?
Yes, when we're talking about microaggression, being in meetings, being asked to leave the meetings when major decisions were made and things of that nature, the whispering, the back and forth, the underhanded activities, but mostly like the exclusion of decision-making and things of that nature. And in higher education, there's this aspect of let's pretend like we're doing this diversity and inclusiveness, but really it doesn't reach to like the boards, like the top, as long as you keep it down at the lower level and we'll address it at that level. But when you're talking about including aspects of how they actually measure their diversity aspects and inclusivity, how is that done? When you ask questions like that, it's like, now keep that over there, don't bring it over here to us. Then you're just continuing to promote racism. You're not there yet. So that's been my personal experience, but I journey on, yet I rise.
Yet I rise, my sister, yet I rise.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Powerful. Jessica Estevez is on the call us today. our Dominican sister in this space who shares in this journey. Jessica, do you want to elaborate on your experience as a Dominican female?
Gracias, Carl. You know, I can always share. I remember the first time someone looked at me and they said, "Oh, wow, you have a really good tan." Or, "Wow, I didn't expect for you to speak so eloquently about XYZ." And this is something that has happened to me in the corporate space, in the community, and this expectation to only bring a certain thing, not only as a female, but as a person of color. Ideally also this like invisibility, like in some spaces I blend so people feel safe to say really offensive and problematic things around race, that when I then speak out, I am then demonized, ostracized, and oh, she's the one that brings up the race issue all the time in both spaces, right? So I think I have experienced that in meetings, I have experienced that in networking groups, and continue to try to amplify that racism is a confusing issue, even for folks who are talking about it all the time. So I know in some of my communities, just this sense of identity and how do we name it continues to create this expectation to assimilate, ignore it, don't talk about it. And I'm constantly being put in those difficult places to amplify that racism is still alive. It just looks very different today.
Thank you, Jessica. Powerful. Erica Hall, homelessness in this city is racism. Powerful statement. Erica, can you elaborate a little bit more if you'd like to? You don't have to, but we'd love to hear more from you. Erica, can you share?
Good evening. I didn't plan to get too much into detail, but homelessness in this city to me is rooted in systemic racism. Our current housing crisis and most people that are facing evictions and eviction moratorium, unfortunately, are people of color, African Americans. The current climate crisis around climate change and flooding, extreme heat, red tide, a lot of environmental toxic issues around redlining and food insecurity. We all know in District 6, they haven't had a grocery store in 4 years. Tangerine Plaza, crime rate is up. Those issues haven't been addressed. So it's all interconnected. It's all with climate change, urban planning, the built environment, environmental racism. Everything that our world revolves around is connected to systemic racism.
Thank you. Powerful, my sister. Powerful. And it's good to see you. Always good to see you. Rebecca Watson, always. Rebecca Watson is on the call today. Rebecca wants to share from a parent raising a child in this society, her challenge. Rebecca, please share.
Thank you, Carl. My son, who's now 20, a junior at Morehouse, he and I moved here back in early 2014 when he was in the middle of 7th grade. So he is a graduate of Pinellas County Schools, both from the middle school part and then high school. And during his 8th grade year, I was surprised coming from Chicago and then New York City. He did directly experience overt racism in school. So he had peers calling him the N-word and monkey regularly. When it was brought to my attention, when he finally shared it with me, I immediately engaged the school leader because my first instinct was, what can I do to create a more safe environment for my son while we sort this thing out? What was challenging for me as a parent was the helplessness I felt in engaging in conversation with the principal, receiving the principal's assurance that she would then begin speaking with teachers and they would sort of put a plan in place to heighten awareness and really look out for my son. And then having a team meeting with all of his teachers and the principal and him. And it was during that meeting that I found out the principal never talked to the teachers. The teachers had no idea, they said that this was going on. And so weeks had gone by and nothing had been done. And there was no apology. There was no real kind of engagement with me in trying to figure out something that would help my son. And so the problem persisted until my son got fed up and got into, he pushed the kid to the ground who continued to badger him. And he was immediately labeled as violent. I was told, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't get there in time. His privileges were taken away. This was his 8th grade year. So he actually received really harsh penalties. And it was just really tough for me to be in the parent's shoes to say, what do I do to protect my son? You know, Mama Bear could go with the torch and burn the school down, but like, what is that going to do? Right. And what do I teach him in this moment about what it means to move through this with power and still protect himself and be safe? So that was, and that happened in 2015 here in Pinellas County.
Powerful. One of the most powerful journeys, mothers and sons and daughters in district school systems, et cetera, battling with this on a regular basis. Rebecca, thank you for that heartfelt sharing. On this question number 1, Pastor Murphy will comment, and then I'm going to go to another question for another 15 minutes. But Pastor Murphy, please share.
Thank you so very much, Carl. You look very distinguished with that beard there, my man. I like it. Good evening, everyone. Let me just say that certainly, you know, being at my age and being in public schools when schools were segregated and we eventually integrated, I've seen a lot, and all those comments that I've heard. Yeah, it's real. But what I wanted to really comment on is that African Americans can be in position to make decisions, or should be able to make decisions. But I still see that minority businesses can still be disenfranchised and excluded. Case in point, the procurement director of the city of St. Pete for over the past 40 years, and probably even now, was African American. But the percentage of city dollars going to minority businesses, absolutely shameful. So we really do have to dismantle this structual racism. Even having a Black president, we still have not really progressed the way we need to. So thank you, Carl, for allowing me to just say those things.
Thank you, Pastor. And you, great segue into part 2 of this time with you in the community to answer the question, what could be done to address and work towards dismantling racism? Pastor gave the perfect segue. What can be done to address and work toward dismantling racism? The floor is open. Please comment. We'll give you 2 minutes each. Anyone?
I hate to jump this one off as well, Carl, but definitely a question that I have a lot of thoughts around. I really do feel like we have to shift narrative. Again, this is Kellen Nixon from the Company Consulting Group. I think we have to shift and control narrative around what does it mean to be Black in America as a asset, as something that literally drives culture, that literally makes change, and that we monetize, as others have monetized on our backs, on our language, on our very essence of being. As we think about ways to add power to that, first we have to see ourselves as the assets that we are to not only our community, but to the global economy. As a person who has been blessed to travel, one of the things that irritates me the most is going into countries or areas where, you know, their native language isn't being spoken. It's our music, it's our culture that's being uplifted and made as a point of connection. But it's something that we lack as a people. We don't connect with our own culture in the way that others are afforded to, and that they're able to monetize and build on top of. So I think a part of this is shifting narrative across Black businesses, across Black communities, that we are the blessing. We are the soil. We are the thing that gives this earth the energy to spin. And some of that has to come through our own telling of self. right? When we think about who we are, that's an element of something that I think we must deeply address.
Kellen, thank you very much for that. School Board Member Caprice Edmond has her hand up, want to share something with us. Mrs. Edmonds, please.
Thank you very much for hosting this conversation. It's very important. Something I think that we can do is lean on our elected officials more and let them know what our expectations are, and that we feel slighted or we need support in many of the areas that were previously discussed, from education to being able to put out bids and get jobs with whomever. I think it's important that we let our elected officials know. In my role, I'm learning that a lot of people aren't aware of how to establish a relationship with the school district or what they need to do in order to earn a bid with the district. So those are some things that I'm working on as relates to Pastor Murphy's question or response to the first question. Again, I think it's going to take all of us to keep pushing on our elected officials about what we need as a people. And it's all elected officials, not solely our African-American officials, because at the end of the day, it takes the majority of the council or board to approve anything. So I think leaning on our elected officials.
Mrs. Edmond, thank you very much for sharing. By the way, as you're answering the questions, folks, the chat box is open. You can put your answers and questions there. Or, of course, you've been unmuted to share with the public as we proceed. So the question again that we're answering, what could be done to address and work towards dismantling racism? We have about 10 more minutes. We got over 100 folks on this call. Anybody else want to comment? Please, floor is open.
So, Carl, Susie Ahog from the city. Interesting. Appreciate the opportunity. Jabbar, thank you for sending the invitation. So before, as we were beginning, as our presenters were initially speaking, I was just thinking through what have I experienced and what are some of the different things. But as a city official and the type of work that our department does, we're referred to as the gappers. So we interact with many different groups. And there have been situations where someone may say, well, you know, those people. What do you mean those people? Those people, my people, those people, you people, those people. I ended up getting called by the other department because apparently this was also another staff person, because the person went and complained about, I called the person out in a meeting. And you know, and sometimes I have a tendency to do that because I think there are a number of words that offend me. And, you know, I had a resident that said, well, I don't go down there. You don't go down there over the Skyway Bridge. You don't go, well, I don't go to those neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods, which neighborhoods? So I think one of the reasons that I'm here is, although not African-American, but I am a person of color. How can I help? Because one of the things that we try to do is provide more information, more connection, more sharing, whether it's culture, ideas, kind of a networking, you know, and really looking at ways that we create opportunities for people to learn more about each other, to understand, so that I don't overreact when somebody goes, those people. Or they may say, oh, well, because the perception is this of a certain type, that they automatically assume this is what's going to happen. So, you know, for opportunities like this and for us to extend invitations to others, I think our school board member mentioned, you know, the involvement of the majority. I'm not necessarily part of the majority, but when classified, technically, I guess I am. So I think every opportunity that we have to be able to share information, encourage and invite others to learn more, to speak up, I think is helpful. And I think is beneficial to get us to the point that we're having more conversations like tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We have about 8 more minutes for to answer this question. And there are many of you who have not spoken yet. So please, we want to hear your sharing. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gabrielle Robinson, and I teach at the University of South Florida on the St. Pete campus. And I just want to read what I put in the chat. The question is, what could be done to address and work towards dismantling racism? And I wrote, first, we have to admit that not everyone wants to dismantle racism. If everyone, especially those in positions of power and who are in charge of the systems that perpetuated the most, really wanted racism to end, it would. Racism is profitable and it's comfortable for a lot of people because they benefit from it. And so we really just have to start being completely honest about that first. And that's the problem, because people just don't want to admit, especially those who benefit and who are comfortable, that they don't necessarily want it to end.
Excellent. Anyone else want to share? We got 7 more minutes on this side.
Yeah, Carl,
I would like to add to what my colleague just stated. This is Dr. LaSonia Moore from the University of South Florida, St. Pete campus. As a young Black female growing up all my life in South St. Petersburg, attending Happy Workers preschool, living in Jordan Park, growing up in an environment where as a child, I did not see many of the things that are shared today here on the call, but growing up when I became a teenager, many of these things were extremely evident. I would like to just add to the point of what my colleague stated. When we're able to admit that many of the individuals within and outside and beyond our community do not want to dismantle racism, that in itself must be addressed prior to us moving forward. Many of the things are interrelated, and until we are to address them systematically as interrelated issues, that is the only way we will be able to begin to dismantle some of the issues that we're discussing here today.
Dr. Moore, thank you very much. And thank you for the shout out for Happy Workers.
You're welcome.
Rich and powerful history. Wells Dunn wants to answer a question here. Mr. Antoine Wells, you're on the call, sir.
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone. One of the ways to dismantle the racism is forums like we have today. This is one great example for people to be able to express their truth and get it out. I am one who struggles with telling my story, being a whistleblower, if you would. I have several instances where I've experienced racism, and even tonight, it was tough to tell my truth. And as a last opportunity was given, I made up in my mind that I was going to tell my truth. Nevertheless, having opportunities to expose people's truths and acknowledge it, and have a platform to work on making a change, making a difference. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this call and hear that there are things that are being done to change this environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine, very, very much. Young brother on his way up. Pastor, I see your hand up, but before I do, I know you're going to say some great words, but is there anyone else on the call before Pastor? Dorothy Davis, would you please share?
Hi, I didn't know, I'm new to this area, kind of. I just moved here recently, but I'm on the St. Petersburg Conference on World Affairs, and my responsibility is to focus on equity and equality in one of our panels. And I would like to have somebody from this group to be on as a speaker, but I can talk about that at another time. My first experience of racism was really through colonialism. I didn't know what racism was until I came to this country, and then I realized it was the same as colonialism. And I have been doing a lot of work in this area. I've had all kinds of experiences with racism here and in different parts, different different issues, corporate level, nonprofit, across the gamut. I am right now working with the UN on the issue of racism globally. And they issued a report, the Systemic Racism Report in June that covered 62 countries, including the US. And they are trying to figure out ways to work at a local level in terms of eradication. And this is a wonderful example of what can happen at a local level. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, David. Ms. Davis, very much. And reach out to anybody on the team for the support you need for your panel. Pastor will allow you the last word here on this section. And Dr. Sears, I'm going to come to you when Pastor is finished. Pastor Lewis Murphy.
Thank you so very much again, Carl. That sister before me is on point. It really is colonialism. I've traveled abroad around the world and you see it all over. So thank you, sister, for those comments. Carl, what can be done to dismantle racism as we coin it? First of all, this is a great start. So Carl, thank you and Randy Russell for having this, I guess, gathering or discussion about racism. But let me say, there's a lot of people on this call with great titles and positions, and we cannot be afraid to voice and call it what it is. So you gotta have the dialogue, but then we need to go move forward from the dialogue with some type of strategy. You know, we need to unify and come up with a strategy to really dismantle this racism or colonialism. And then don't let our white brothers and sisters change the narrative. No, we need to call it what it is and hold them accountable, because we are all in this together. So Carl, thank you so very much to unify and to come up with some strategy to move forward.
Thank you very, very much, Pastor. At this time, I want to bring Dr. Sears back to share the body of work that was done in this study, reminding all of us that we are on this call today as a result of a commissioned study on racism in St. Petersburg. And this we'll hear now is the body of work that was done. Dr. Sears, please share. You're on mute. There you go. You're still on mute.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. There were 3 outcomes for this study: an overview of the race history and current experience in St. Petersburg, recommendations for changes, and what's next. So we were tasked with the following. 1, to provide a historical overview and current data trends that illustrate how structural racism affects various aspects of Black lives and community in the city of St. Petersburg and its impact on individuals and the community well-being. 2, to provide recommendations for policies and practices that may help to dismantle structural racism in the city. And 3, identify additional features of structural racism impacting the Black residents and communities in St. Petersburg that may need further research, documentation, and solutions. In this overview, I will describe St. Petersburg race history, economic segregation and its impact on current day realities, education, health, criminal legal system, and wage gap trends. Finally, I will offer some recommendations for change. I'm having a technical, there you go. So St. Petersburg has a well-documented history of segregation that limited opportunities to Black. In 1868, John Donaldson was the first African-American to settle in St. Petersburg. The Black population in St. Petersburg began to grow during the building of the final stages of the Orange Belt Railway and the building boom of 1920s. As the Black population increased, local policies and practices were created reflecting the national and state policies that built the structural racism that continues today. For instance, Aggressive vagrancy laws were used as a steady pipeline of Black convict labor. The vagrancy laws fueled the city-run convict labor program, construction projects, and weed gangs and work crews. Between 1910 to 1935, although African Americans were 18% of the city population, they accounted for 82% of individuals convicted of hard labor. There were also evidence of racially biased policing that worked in conjunction with the Ku Klux Klan to intimidate and terrorize the Black community. Cross-burning rituals were publicly announced in local newspapers, and lynching were documented. For instance, John Thomas was shot in his cell, and his body was subsequently mutilated on December 25th, 1906, for the murder of James Mitchell, the city police chief. In 1914, John Evans was lynched for the suspected murder of Ed Sherman, a white photographer. Police brutality complaints were documented extensively under police chief E.D. Doc Vaughan leadership during 1937 to 1945. During his tenure, abusive behaviors were normalized. The fight for civil rights and equal opportunities began in the 1910s and crescendos during the civil rights era and spanned to recent time. For instance, in 1968, the sanitation workers went on strike for better wage and benefits and working conditions. In 2018, citizens complained about police action at the Martin Luther King parade. And in 2020, the Black community stood in solidarity with others around the country to protest the death of George Floyd. The Black community has used protests as an avenue to express concerns about inequities and discrimination. Public office and politics fueled segregation and discriminatory practices. Some individuals held public office and publicly affirmed their commitment to racist ideologies. For instance, in 1932, Glenn Miller, who served as the president of the local Ku Klux Klan chapter and a member of the Chamber of Commerce and a former council member, proposed prison farms. Despite the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, the White Citizens Council fought school integration in the 1950s and obtained over 12,000 signatures to support their efforts. There were no Black city council members until 1969. This lack of representation of Black and restrictive voting practices impacted the development of equitable and inclusive policies. For 100 years, following the arrival of the first African American in the area later chartered as St. Petersburg, white power brokers exerted unmitigated influence over public policy decision and the allocation of today's equivalent of tens of millions of dollars in public investment that benefited white people exclusively or narrowly so. Jim Crow laws, policies, and practices restricted social interaction between Black and white residents. This disproportionately impacted economic opportunities for the Black community. Police enforced segregation and limited interactions between Black and white, which decreased the likelihood that Black businesses could offer their services to white residents. For example, the 1920s mandate indicated that white males would be arrested if found in Black communities, particularly in the evenings. Organizations also supported discriminatory behaviors towards Black. For instance, on October 1st, 1957, the White Citizen Council publicly supported economic boycotts of businesses that hired Blacks. There were also evidence of legalized and officially imposed market limits for Black entrepreneurs, including license exclusion for some occupation, city-sanctioned contract limitations for Black-owned firms in the construction industry, and hugely disproportionate crackdown and arrest for illegal business activities by Black versus white entrepreneurs. Compared to white St. Pete residents, Blacks did not have equal avenue to accrue wealth. A glass ceiling was implemented, which restricted economic opportunities for members of the Black community. The suppression of Black wealth building through homeownership occurred via locally enforced residential segregation policies, and this limited the value of homes owned in segregated Black areas. The laws and the practice of redlining also prevented Black home buying and building in white areas of St. Petersburg. City officials openly colluded with white property owners to limit Black home buying and building in white areas, while simultaneously charging policies that limited home values and home building opportunity in segregated Black areas of the city. 24 local officials are on the record supporting violation of federal and local laws to uphold segregation. For example, in 1958, Mayor John Burroughs said, "I like the Negro. I like him in his place. I do not believe in integration." His policy stance and those of City Council upheld segregation until the mid-1960s in defiance of federal court orders. The city blocked Black economic growth in many ways by enforcing Black workforce control policies, including convict labor loans and leasing programs, wage price fixing, and local government pay disparities for Black workers, including teachers' salaries and city-paid debt benefits. The city also implemented geographic and contractual limits to Black entrepreneurship, employment, and contracting discrimination, and adopted policies of separate and unequal investment in healthcare, education, social services, amenities, infrastructure, and all other policy genre under the city's purview. History has proven that separate, it is not equal, particularly for education. The tax support for primarily Black school was grossly inadequate, negatively impacting Black students' educational opportunities. The length of the school term for Black schools was half the amount of time allocated to the white school environment. This educational model increased the number of Blacks who were uneducated and remained in poverty. Hence, although the city poured tens of millions into white-only schools by 1926, only a fraction of that amount went to educating Black students. Unfortunately, this was deemed as a normal state of affairs by the white city leaders. Despite federal laws that ordered the desegregation of schools in 1954, St. Petersburg continued to promote a segregated environment. It was not until 1971 that the Pinellas School Board voluntarily agreed to desegregate and was the first school district in Florida to utilize the busing systems to promote desegregation. Due to notable educational disparities, Pinellas County Schools engaged in a 50-year lawsuit related to proficiency on state assessment, graduation rates, participation in accelerated classes, eligibility criteria for special education program, school discipline, and increasing the diversity of their workforce. In 2017, the case was mediated, which resulted in the proposed Bridging the Gap plan. In 2015, the Tampa Bay Times also won a Pulitzer for their series entitled Failure Factories, which documented the lack of funding and profound inequitable success rates of students who are Black. Based on interventions that included transformational teams, increased funding, and additional educational support, 3 of the 5 schools reported improvement in their academic performance. The quality of healthcare received is tied to race. Historical records illustrate that the city leaders invested 10 times more in healthcare facilities and services for whites versus Black citizens. For example, although there was a public hospital in St. Petersburg, it was not open to Black residents until 1923, when Mercy Hospital opened in South St. Petersburg for the Black community. The services offered by Mercy Hospital was impacted due to inadequate staffing, financial resources, and delay in acquiring the latest technology in healthcare. Shocking and deplorable were the terms used to describe Mercy Hospital in 1946. The City Council frankly admitted that it was inadequate. So the picture on the screen illustrates a room in Mercy Hospital in 1946. A Black person struggled with health disparities from birth, and it is likely to have a lower life expectancy rate. According to the Foundations for a Healthy St. Petersburg 2018, except for lung cancer, the Black or African American rates exceed the rates of both whites and Hispanic for all leading causes of death. Thus, a Black person is more likely to die from diabetes, prostate cancer, breast cancer, congestive heart failure, a stroke, and coronary heart disease when compared to their white counterpart. These health disparities are well documented, and economic segregation is associated with the extent individuals can access and afford quality health care.
I want to pause for 1 minute, Dr. Sears, to remind people that if you're on the call today, when my Dr. Sears is complete, you'll have a chance to ask questions of the research team. So hang in there. We really want you to get your questions to the research team. Dr. Sears, as you begin to wrap this up, looking forward to hearing from the team too. So thank you. Sorry for the interruption. I want to remind people, don't get off the call, folks, until you get a chance to ask your question of the panel.
All right. So residents of certain neighborhoods in St. Petersburg live shorter lives in part because of where they live. Significant gap in life expectancy persists across Pinellas County, cities and towns, zip codes, and neighborhoods. For example, the average life expectancy of St. Petersburg citizens living in the Campbell Park area is over 16 years less than those living 3 miles away in Old Northeast or Snell Island. City leaders supported disparate criminal sentencing and openly supported arrests that targeted Black people. One facet of Black labor control was a city-run convicts labor work program and pipeline that ensnared thousands of African American over nearly 40 years, costing Black families hundreds of millions of dollars in labor that went to prison work instead. The graph illustrates that except for reckless and careless driving and motor vehicle noise, the percentage of Black defendants for each offense exceed the percentage of the Black population in St. Petersburg. More than half of the people arrested for resisting arrest with violence, obstructing, resisting arrest without violence, improper pedestrian actions, and license not carried are Black. Income for African American is consistently lower than that of people who are white. No matter how many educational degrees an individual attains, this is true for nearly all careers. For example, in 2016, the median annual income earned for people who identified as non-Hispanic Black in Pinellas was 67% of those who identified as white, non-Hispanic white. By 2018, that ratio was 73%. So that was the summary of our results. Based on our findings, we acknowledge that that is just the phase 1. We propose the following 3 recommendations. 1, create an equity department, the Office of the Mayor. 2, review existing proposed policies for impact on race equity. And 3, create a permanent resident-led race equity commission. There is a need to create an equity department within the Office of the Mayor. It is proposed that the director of the office will have a permanent seat at each successive administrative table for all meaningful decisions and outcomes. The role of the director would include an annual equity assessment with input from the community, liaising with the budget committee to negotiate adequate funds for needed city projects, and staying on top of the data to bring important issues to the notice of the city and its residents in a timely fashion. This recommendation is consistent with newly proposed amendment to the city charter specifically proposed number 3. There is a need to create and implement an accountability strategy with measurable outcomes tracked over time with race-specific data, so that the city will monitor and incrementally improve progress and performance until equitable outcomes are achieved. This should include a commitment to race equity, reviewing of existing city policies and practices, and of all future proposed policies and practices. Finally, there should be creation of a permanent resident race equity board or commission to help ensure the sustainability of the recommended transformation, inform, and drive continual progress. The performance monitoring by and input from the resident commission will increase the likelihood that informed continuous improvement toward equity will become part of the organizational structure and culture. It is recommended that this is to become a permanent way of conducting business in the city.
Outstanding.
So at this time, I invite members of the audience to share their thoughts or pose questions they have about the recommendation.
What we'll do is you put your questions in the chat box and I will forward those on to Dr. Sears, and she will then direct either to herself or a member of the research team. So we've got about maybe 30 or 40 minutes in this space, folks, before we wrap up the call today. So please, what are your thoughts, recommendations for the ideas toward the recommendations? It says here, this should be monitored every 90 days. What do you think about that, Dr. Sears? Should the policy be recommended on, it says here, every 90 days. Deborah Thrower, what did you mean by that, please? Please share.
Well, Dr. Sears was saying earlier that talking about some timelines, and it just kind of fell off to, there was no specific time. So I'm saying if something were to be implemented and it would be put in place, there needs to be some specific monitoring times up front. So rather than say, okay, we're going to do this, I think it should be monitored perhaps by the community or city officials or whomever every 90 days. Put some type of time frame in it so that you can go back and revisit things that worked and things maybe that didn't work. Just a suggestion. It could be every 30 days until you have a something set in stone. Thank you.
Very good. Yes, you are responding to the recommendations, ladies and gentlemen. So we set about 10 minutes for that, and then we'll go to the Q&A for the overall program. So these 10 minutes here are responding to the recommendations. Please share. Now we know we got some people here to share on that space. Harry Harvey, what you got?
Well, I put something in the chat. I think that part of it, I responded to what, and then I looked at, after I had done that, I looked and saw about the continuing effort. And I referenced the community alliance that a lot of people on this call remember that we had when we had some pretty serious racial problems and other problems in the city. And I think the community alliance did well, you know, during the time that it existed. I think it's time for another similar organization, which is what was called for, so we can keep this on the table. But more than that, one of the things I said, and I really believe that the one way out of this whole thing and keep us from going over the same thing over and over again is the power of the vote. We've got to get people voting, and we can see all the efforts are being made now to keep people from voting. It's because what happened in this last election. And I think that's what we're going to have to do. I often say this when I tell people about how important the vote is. When the civil rights movement got the vote in, got people voting in the cities, the big cities where all of the racial unrest was held, I asked them the question, now you tell me now, since we started voting and put emphasis on voting, when is the last time that was a non-black mayor in Montgomery, Alabama? Not Montgomery, we just got that one. But in Birmingham, Atlanta, Jackson, Mississippi. Find that out, you know, and why we don't have, you can't tell me the answer right now, is because it's been such a long time. And that was a result of voting, people voting. The population didn't change that much, but Black people were able to vote and their voices were heard, and that's what you get when you vote. And of course, people know that now. That's why they're doing everything they can to keep people from voting.
Absolutely, Jerry. Hey, general election coming up here soon in November, folks. I trust you are registered. If you're not, please do so and vote. Exercise your right. Questions for the recommendations going to Dr. Sears. She's waiting to hear from you. The floor is open. Anyone that want to respond to the recommendations? Alex Morphosis. Can you handle an answer in 2 minutes, my friend? Would love to hear your point of view on the recommendation, sir. You want to share?
Yes. Forgive me for being a little late. The thing I'm hearing is that this focuses on the city, which represents 3% of the local economy. There's plenty of companies here that have national reach. They do federal contracts that regularly and quietly get waivers claiming that they can't find anyone. Is this going to be a comprehensive attempt for the entire $25 to $30 billion a year economy? Or is this simply going to be focused on the $500 million to $750 million that the city controls?
That's a great question. Dr. Sears, to what extent is this recommendations coming to for the entire city's industries, or is this just applied to city government? Can you respond?
Yeah, so Alex, thanks for the question. This study was commissioned by the city of St. Petersburg. So the parameters that guided our actions were restricted to the city. But we view this as a phase one. Our goal is to scale it up and perhaps use the recommendation to inform other DEI efforts within the community and also nationally. I see my colleague Tim Duttenhan is also up, so I would defer to Tim to respond as well.
Tim?
Yeah, the other thing I would add to this is that though this is very specific to the policy-making capacity of the city, it also has the mention, and Ruth May will get to this in a little bit. One of the implications is that the city also has the power to convene and to influence. And to Alex's question earlier, that is part of what the imagination is for how this thing might get bigger than the limitations of city policy development.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else want to respond to recommendations? Robin Burton, you want to say anything? Or Lindsay Grove, you want to say anything? The floor is open to the recommendations. Please advise. Robin?
Well, I mean, I just want to say, first of all, there's an excellent presentation. I haven't been in St. Pete for, well, I guess about 6 years, so didn't know all of the history, so thank you for that. I am definitely in favor of a commission. I am definitely in favor of checks and balances, and definitely in favor of getting this underway right away. I don't think that we should talk anymore. I think we should be about action. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Beverly Woody Powell, what do you want to say? Give us your wisdom, please, on the recommendation. Are you on the call, Beverly? Stacy Croto, do you want to respond to the recommendation, sir? Ma'am. Everybody's been quiet.
I don't have anything to add other than encouragement to vote for 3 and 4, and for us to all go forth and share this with everybody we know in St. Pete.
Thank you, Stacy, very much. Sandra J., any questions or comments on the recommendations?
I do not have any. I'm applauding my colleagues and for this study. It's extensive and I've learned a lot. Like what was said before, let's move forward. We've gotten some work to do, and as citizens here in Pinellas, let's not only vote, but hold our elected official accountable for why and what we put them in power. And I mean from Pinellas all the way up to the governor's office.
Thank you, Sandra J. We had a comment here that says from Ellsworth Williams, is there anything punitive if you don't follow the recommendations? Ruth Sears, what was the considerations there? Is there anything punitive if the city or whomever didn't follow the recommendations as outlined? Did you consider that?
The goal is not to make punitive recommendations, but just provide ideas for systemic change, because too often, if you take a behaviorist approach, reward and punishment, It doesn't build the notion of we are going forward. Our goal is we're all in this together. So we need to reflect on collective ways to heal where we own our truth and move forward rather than reinforce behaviors that have proven to be ineffective. But nevertheless, we sympathize and empathize with the journeys of those who went before us and thank them for their efforts. And hopefully we can extend their work in the future.
Thank you. The body of work is powerful, well thought out. Congrats again to you, Dr. Sears, and your leadership here. Is there a way that people can get a hold of the research? Is it going to be published somehow? Can get one in the chat? Before we go to Q&A, finally, how do we get a hold of the research?
Yeah, so we intend to release it formally after we have multiple presentation and going back to council, and then the document will be formally released, and it will be available on the university website for this study. So Michelle, if possible, can you drop the link in the chat so you can monitor it and follow us, and if need be, send me an email and I will definitely respond in a timely fashion.
Outstanding. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the community.
Mr. Lavender,
Please.
Mr. Lavender, before
Yes,
you go on, I want to add to Dr. Sears' comments. So our group developed recommendations. We did not come up with punitive measures. When the city adopts the study and the recommendation, they can then impose or add particular restriction standards and other ways of measuring any progress on the recommendations. And secondly, I would like to say that the body of work will also be available on the City of St. Pete's website.
Outstanding.
So we would be able to access the document on either website.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reese. And by the way, since you're up, this is the time for the next 20 minutes or so, as I see by the agenda, anyone in the community on this call can ask a question of the research team that includes Ms. Gwendolyn Reese. If you have a question for those folks, I'm sorry, is there a pause?
Yeah, so before we actually open it up for final questions, I want to make a note of the implications because it answers some of the questions relative to data metrics and the implication of the study. So there are 4 real big implications of our work. 1, city system introspection. Regularly and extensively reviewing current policies, practice, and normative narrative is a progressive initiative on behalf of the city. 2, data-driven metrics. This progress can further center racial equity in measures adopted by the city. 3, sharing power with residents. This further amplifies an authentic commitment to develop relationships with the community and promote racial justice initiatives. 4, power of influence. The city can serve as a model for and invite other governments and organizations to emulate and promote efforts to address equitable opportunities at different levels of government and other sectors seeking to support racial equity and justice. So I conclude by acknowledging the city of St. Petersburg should be commended for taking an unvarnished look at its race history and how it has generated current challenges. This is a positive way forward to create equitable opportunities for residents and to improve the overall quality of life by carefully examining structural racism that impacts the lives of the Black community. So these are the references that were mentioned in the presentation. The report will include a more extensive reference list for your perusal. For additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact me via email or phone. And at this time, I turn it over to you, Carl, for questions and answers.
Thank you very much. The opportunity is before you, ladies and gentlemen. Again, you know who the panel is. Please, if you have questions for folks, please address those to them either in the chat box or you're unmuted to ask them directly. So please, you have a question.
Mr. Lavender, I would like to make a correction or for you to make a correction.
Please.
Credit was given to the foundation for both this evening's conversation as well as the work of this commission. And I would like to clarify, and I think we've said it throughout, that the Christman administration commissioned this study and the group of people on this conversation, we're the ones who conducted. We ask and we're very grateful to Mr. Lavender for the wonderful job he's doing in moderating this conversation, but we must give credit where credit is due.
Thank you, my sister. See, Pastor got me in trouble.
Gwen, that was my ignorance. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me.
You're gonna get a whooping. You're gonna get a whooping.
Gwen. Thanks, Gwen.
You're welcome.
Love you much, Gwen. Love you much. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions for our panel? Please address those.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I wanted to know how much veterans was included in the study. The Pinellas County, even with St. Pete, with having the Bay Pines VA there, the veterans make up almost 20% of the population of Pinellas and St. Pete. Were they included in the study?
Dr. Sears.
Yes, we interviewed a veteran particularly and got information. And we also opened it up to town halls and open conversation. We collected emails and correspondence. So we made it accessible to all walks of life and individuals representing the diversity and also the intersectionality of the St. Petersburg area, some of which were veterans in the study that were part of our sample.
Gwen,
can I speak, Carl?
Yes, please.
One of the most profound things that I found during the deep research about economic advancement of Black people is that we had over 2,000 African Americans serve in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, when the city created a land giveaway program for veterans, they gave away nearly 600 free lots of land for veterans of World War II to build homes on. Only 10 of those lots went to African Americans.
Praise God.
And so there are ways that the veteran community has shown up in the research that will be documented in the history of our city. But be aware that it's limited. I saw the questions in the chat about unemployment among veterans. The way that our government collects information gives us a limited picture into some of those things, but we have not forgotten in the documentation the importance of our veteran community.
Thank you, Gypsy. And veterans on the call, thank you for serving, for sure. Thank you for serving. Brother John, question for the panel.
I do, thank you, and thank everyone for the work that you're doing in this particular study and the work that we'll do in the future. My question is, I think it was 2018 or 19, following the MLK lockdown by the city of St. Pete, community advocates led by Jabbar Edmond and Janet Wright spoke to the committee of the whole, not committee of the whole, I think it was Youth and Family Services Committee, and they asked for a study as well as a, it escapes me now, a committee, a sunshine committee. And I didn't see the third recommendation, but it sounded similar. And so I just wanted to clarify, was that third recommendation about a board, is that in line with what was recommended by that committee to the administration?
So Dr. Sears, did you compare notes between previous conversations here and the revised implications for the new plan? So you can address that, could you?
Yes, it was definitely addressed. And thank you, Jabbar, for his insight. Jabbar made it very clear because as we were planning the study and looking at the implications, he also helped us to delineate uniqueness and also similarities in the space. So Brother John, you are right. It is similar, but we're realizing we need a commission that actually is stable and is sustained by the office itself. So we acknowledge the contributions of Jabbar, and Jabbar, perhaps you want to add, and I would ask Tim also to extend clarification if need be as well.
Great, thank you. Brother Jabbar or Mr. Tim, are you still on the call? They may have gotten off on the call.
Jabbar, go ahead. So if he may be getting on, but it is, Dr. Sears summarized it well. This really was Jabbar's contribution was very specific to this area, Brother John, and the intention is clearly to honor that work that happened in 2018. The other issue is the creation of the office. So the idea is to codify race equity inside the city in an important way, with a clear relationship between the creation of an office for race equity and a director, very similar to what the Charter Review Commission has identified.
Thank you, Tim. I've got a question for Dr. James McHale. You have an important position in our city. You've studied for several years family life among Black people, especially Black men. I'm curious about any discoveries for you as a result of this study. Did you see something that surprised you, that has compelled you to go deeper into your work or gain new perspective? Are you still on the call, sir?
Still here, Carl. So, surprise, no. Understanding with greater depth, yes. I think one of the things that Ruth May referred to a little bit earlier on had to do with the disparities in life expectancy between folks in Campbell Park and folks in Snell Island, and a 16-year discrepancy in how long people live. The fact that everything we've been talking about on the call today has an impact on life and death and mortality and health. And what I would say about that is what became clearer to me were a couple of different things. One of them is, early on in life is when you and I and everybody on this call had our biological systems built by the grown-ups around us. So the first few years of our life is the time when about 80% of all of our development in terms of our health, stress response, and so forth is created. And we're sitting here today with the same stress response systems that were created when we were babies and toddlers, right? So we've known that for a while. What became clearer to me is that the impact of all these things that we've been talking about, to the extent that they weigh on the moms and dads and grandmoms and daycare providers and the folks who are taking care of infants and toddlers, prevent people from being able to do what they know how to do, what they love, what they want very most to do, which is to provide that intensive, loving care for their kids on a regular basis. When we're weighted down, you and I, when any of us are weighted down, it takes something out of us and prevents us from being at our best. And when you've got these factors that we've been talking about today, economic factors, homelessness, sort of the injustice, the policing, all of these are weighing on families on top of the everyday stresses of living in this modern society. That's having an impact indirectly on infants and toddlers. And the reason I say that is because that then has an impact on lifetime health and development. The development early on in our lives shapes the way that we're able to cope with stresses as we go into elementary school and high school and so forth. And then the unrelenting stresses that continue, that we've been talking about today, have a further weathering effect. And so it's no surprise that by the time we are looking at folks in midlife and later life expectancy is shorter, because this is starting from in the womb and in the earliest years of life. And this is the imperative. Whoever said, let's stop talking, let's start doing, that's the imperative right now to fix things for the pregnant women and the infants and the toddlers in our community, so that we can be building stronger biological systems. But the other thing that I did not know, and this was news to me, is that when we're looking at things as basic as infant mortality, infants are more likely to survive when cared for by a Black doctor than a white doctor. And so that's not my research or our research at the Family Study Center, but we had the opportunity to be looking at studies, large scale studies that would look at an entire state. So that's state of Florida, the race of the provider. That doesn't, that's something that I maybe might have thought, but to actually see the research providing evidence for that. So it's sort of the quality of care, access to care, the stressors affecting families as they're trying to raise their young children, sort of the absence or the lack of adequate providers of color in our community for people, not able to, even if they wanted to see a Black professional, there may not be enough of those folks in our community to see. And so all of those things came together for me in realizing how much of a mountain there is to move, and sort of the will to try to get everyone together. I mentioned in my early opening comments, this is for everyone. This is for every person to try to move this mountain together. And I would say I learned more that I did not know. And I think, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question the way it intended it, but those were some learning lessons.
And you are a powerful ally in that place. And I really appreciate that, Jeremy. Thank you very, very much. After your hand is up, you want to address a question to a member of the panel? Kathy Wagner.
Yes. I guess, first of all, again, it's an amazing presentation and everything, and I agree with the recommendations. I guess, however, I was curious as to where do the actual action items kind of come in? Because is it the commission or the department or things? I mean, like, we know that we need to do things with the schools. We know we need to do things with the police department and housing and all these different areas that have been so adequately presented during the presentation here. But, you know, like, I don't know what the city council is going to be discussing over the next year. And if it's not some of these things, and we can't, or this group or whatever group it's going to be, isn't going to carry some real solid evidence forward to say, we need to do X or Y or Z, how are things going to change?
Yes, Dr. Sears, sort of turning the implications and recommendations into actions. And is there a plan for that? How does that happen?
This is where we need the voice of the people, because I mean, even in our design, we built a community into our design. It wasn't where it's just academics and an ivory tower. We partnership with the community. It's your reality. It's your lived experiences. It's your voices. So as we propose these recommendations and we work with your city council, it is the community that have to hold their represented elected official accountable. So I'm confident that if by working collaboratively and also having some degree of accountability, progress can occur. So Kathy, you're right. This is a first step. And so after elections come November, we're going to have a new leadership team, regardless of who's in that role. The goal is to extend the work, but also support systemic changes. And this is why your voices matter. Your expectation of holding individuals accountable matter. And so we work with you, we support you, but it is the community itself that would make a difference. Together, we can make the change happen.
Thank you. Kathy, this is a study that does not go on the shelf, on the proverbial shelf. Yes.
Mr. Lavender, the power of the influence and the power of the people does not wait until a new administration. When we present this to the city council, we need your overwhelming support of our study and our recommendations. So your action is needed now. Even immediately after this presentation, you can begin to email and call our city council members and others in administration to let them know that you support the study and you want to, and we are going to hold them accountable to the recommendations. I feel that these recommendations are action items.
Yes, thank you very much.
They're just action items that we have to make sure they happen.
Excellent, well said. Recommendations are action items. Deuces Live, you're on the call today. What's happened? What do you see? What do you hear? Is that Beatrice? Who's Deuces Live? I see your hand up. Deuces Live?
Yeah, hi, this is Beatrice Farrell. And my question is a significant number of items that impact us are on the county level, i.e. the prosecutor's office, the tax appraiser's office. And while I'm excited to see that there is action taken with respect to the administration of St. Petersburg, a lot of the systemic changes are not at a city level, they're at a county level. And how does this, how can this report be communicated to those elected officials?
Interesting. So you had Alex Morphus has mentioned that 3% of the economy is city government. Now you have a question about county's role in city government. But Dr. Sears, how are those two things, or how is county government considered in the implications of this plan, if at all?
I mean, thinking about it from a mathematical set,
yes.
It's inner to outer. So the city is within the county. So this can be viewed as a catalyst for change. And so if we light the fire correctly, the flame will burn and inspire change across the system itself. So we're hoping that with future funding, perhaps we view this as a phase one. We had 6 months to do a study, and our goal was to really do a systemic approach, just getting insight into the historical trends, et cetera. But it speaks volumes for the city of St. Petersburg, for their progressive viewpoints, for their willingness to own their truth. That in itself is visionary, that in itself is progressive, but that in itself is hope. And so hopefully, as the county reflects, they may need to start doing some steps to reflect on their own behaviors and their own practices. Like, for example, when we looked at the educational data set, like the limited data that we did evaluate, it highlighted systemic issues. Fortunately, 2017, the Bridging the Gap plan was launched. Hence, there highlights that there is opportunity for some reflection and also for us to reflect on ways to make our system better. And so hopefully, like I said, thinking of it as a set from inner to outer, we can be the change that we seek to be in this world.
Is anybody else on the panel? Thank you very much. Does anyone on the panel want to respond to that question also? Gwen, others on the team? Yes, please.
I will add that in terms of next steps, we also wanted to make sure that the county, the school board, state reps, all the way up the chain of federal, that this study is shared with them as well. So in addition to city council, we understand the importance, like Beatrice said, that all levels of government have an opportunity to hear the study findings. And so that is a part of the next step in terms of sharing the information. So wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that that is something that we're planning and working with the study team on, to make sure that it's just not a presentation to city council, but to all of the other levels of government as well.
Excellent. Well said. Thank you. Any other questions for the panel? Any other questions for the panel? Any panelists want to respond so far to what you've heard from the community, either in the chat box or those that shared openly? Anybody want to respond to those comments? I'm going to go back, Dr. C, I'm sorry, Lisa Yaxto. Would you please? Yes.
Yeah, Lisa Yaxto. I was actually trying to bring out Dr. Grove's point. When will it be presented to council, and will they need to vote to adopt it so that we can be there and support?
Nikki, I defer to you with scheduling information.
Yes, we're looking at the beginning of November for it to be presented officially in city council meeting, but in terms of the actual sharing with all electeds, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're hoping to have that scheduled so that it'll be city council, county, school board, all of them being able to hear the study findings all at one time. So that's what we're working with the team to pull together.
There were some really powerful words, Nikki, shared in the chats. I don't know how you carry that sentiment, Dr. Sears and Nikki, to the next level of sharings and reportings with county government. You're going to share your data, which was excellent. Implications, wonderful. But these folks here has had some really good, rich, and powerful sentiment on this behalf. How do you capture all of that? Are you going to write it all down? Do you keep this in a file? How do you keep that going and then share that with folks as you move around the county?
Yeah, so we're planning on saving the chat, and this is why before we decide to speak to the council, we wanted to speak to the people. And this is why we call it a draft, because your narrative, your feedback, your insight is going to help us refine it to ensure the voice of the people accurately aligns with our finding as well. And so there's opportunity for us to reflect on what did we write, and also to what extent is it aligning with what's being said or with modifications. And so therefore your voices will be embodied. So that's why we're going to release it when we finally present it to the council. But our goal is to speak to the people first.
Excellent, Dr. Sears, thank you. Again, any questions or comments either from the panel or from the community in these last 7 minutes or so of our call this evening? I know you want to get off and get your dinner cooked and get unwound from the day and get ready.
Mr. Lavender, this is Deborah Thrower, and I would like to suggest, in addition to presenting the findings in their draft form to city council and other officials, that there's a way to present this to the layman, folk in the community, small groups, whether it's a group of Black men, wherever they are, barbershops, beauty, I don't know. I'm not sure what to say, and I don't mean to be, like disrespectful, but to the point of someone who is ready, willing, and able to even have paper copies. I know that's money to share with mask or however, to share things with even guys hanging out on the corner or not hanging out on the corner. What is the plan there? And you may not know at this particular point, but city council is very, very important, but to a lay audience, plans to say, guess what we've done and guess where we're going.
Thank you, Deborah. Well said.
There are two hands. I want to ensure my teammates speak, Gypsy Gallardo and then Ms. Gwen, because it's like I said, I have a rock star team and I want to make sure their voices are heard.
Exactly right. I want to call them next. Go ahead, Gwen.
Ms. Gypsy first and then Gwen, Mrs. Gwen.
Okay, so I want to emphasize what Beatrice and Gwen said. whether you know it or not, that whole wave of attention and advocacy after George Floyd's murder sort of waned somewhat. And probably about half of that wave has stuck with this. There was the whole wave of people identifying and signaling that they were with this whole equity movement. And some of that has gone away. So to just emphasize what Beatrice said and what Gwen said, we need you all to show up when this is presented to council, to speak the level of enthusiasm we've seen here tonight, and to just encourage that they continue to press forward with this, despite the resistance to the acknowledgement that structural racism exists.
Powerful, thank you. Ms. Reese, please.
I wanted to address Deborah Thrower's comment about taking it to the masses. And I think I heard her correctly say before the council, we are working in a very, very short period of time. And it is important to us, it's imperative that this goes before council during this present administration, the Christman administration. So this conversation tonight was only our first step in taking it to the community, but it will be the only step we can take prior to taking it to council, because we will have another meeting, as was indicated by Nikki, with all elected officials. That's in 2 weeks. And then a week or two later, we're presenting to council. So it doesn't mean that this is the end of our outreach. This is just the beginning of our outreach.
Thank you, Gwen. That's very wise, that you have to seize the moment and strike while the iron is hot to city council because of the short time frame, and then get the information out as it evolves with recommendations. Thank you, Gwen. I appreciate that.
Very well said. Anyone else? The floor is open. Any comments or questions for the panel? Again, let me applaud the panel. Your stewardship and commitment here is exemplary, even sacrificial. We know you gave up pieces of your heart to go into this. It is a deep and sometimes lonely journey to discover the level of toxic attitudes and racism that people can exhibit, that folk can literally walk in hate and hate you because you are a different skin color. To realize that deeper and deeper can be exhausting to manage all the time. And so I salute each of you for your commitment in that space. Again, and thank you so much. Anyone else with a question or comment for the panel before I turn it over to Ruth Sears to close out? Yes, Paula Thomas, please.
Hi, good evening. I've been listening in for the whole time. I am a native New Yorker, born in New York, but I lived in Florida, and I went to school in St. Pete, where I got my master's in organization and leadership. And one of the things I wanted to ask the panelists, they was amazing, amazing. I've experienced some racism here in Tampa, not once, but twice. And I wanted to ask the question, when and where will we have the conversation and dialogue around doing the right thing, which is ethics? And I believe that with those in leadership power and can help change what we're going through in the times of today. Yes. And really calling out what it is and not be hiding behind the shadow, but let the light shows when leadership is not doing what they're doing that is ethically, and especially when it comes to racism, that we just don't continue to put a bandage over it and just, put it under the rug and be like, okay, they're going to change, their behavior is going to change. When you countless see this going on time and time and time again. So I just wanted to applaud everyone. I know this is our first meeting, our first conversation, and the panel of the research you guys have done is amazing. And I just recently finished my diversity, equity, inclusion that you guys did through USF, which was a true blessing for me. And I'm retired, so I'm here to help in many ways as I can for our future of our children.
Thank you, Paula, very, very much. And welcome to St. Pete in the Bay Area from New York. Great
Yes.
to see you. Yes. With Ms. Reese, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Thomas, for bringing that up. Carl, Nikki, and I have been involved in over a 2-year period in developing a leadership program focused on ethics.
Yes.
Because we feel, as you do, that many of our elected officials and leaders are not operating with integrity and ethics. So thank you very much. That just reinforces for us that our work is not in vain and we need to continue to make this leadership program happen. So thank you.
And thank you
You are
again, Ms.
so
Reese.
welcome. Thank you all.
Dr. Ruth May Sears, if you could wrap this up for us. You may have one more question, but otherwise I'm turning the camera over to you for your conclusions and we'll move toward closure. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ruth May Sears, please.
I wish to thank everyone for attending today and also providing rich feedback that gave us lots of food for thought. Once again, I thank the City of St. Petersburg, Mayor Kreisman and his leadership team, Nikki Capehart, and my phenomenal colleagues who've been phenomenal, be it community partners, as well as fellow University of South Florida researchers, and of course, the community advocates who ensured voices of concerns were brought to the table. We look forward to future activities in this space, and we do believe that change can happen. We're all in this together. So stay motivated, stay encouraged, and be agents of change. Without any further ado, thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Have a good night, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good